Hey nerds, we are talking about Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Episode 3, Ghosts of Illyria. We are going to do a spoiler-free review of the episode, and then we are going to get into a full spoiler breakdown of the episode, starting now. Welcome to Nerd Social. I am Nathan.
And I'm Kandra.
Hey, so the spoiler-free logline provided to us by Paramount is the U.S.S. Enterprise encounters a contagion that ravages the ship. One by one, the entire crew is incapacitated except for number one, Una, Chin Riley, who must now confront a secret she's been hiding as she races to find a cure. So, Kandra, what did you think of this episode?
Yeah, no, I liked it. I think we learn a lot about not only Una, but also Dr. Mbenga in this episode. And I think it's sort of an episode where you sort of see people rethinking some of the choices the Federation has made, which is always, I think, nice to see. You have the Prime Directive and all these sort of rules they follow. But what I think comes out of this episode is why Starfleet or the Federation continuing this action or with this decision that it made years ago. So rethinking some of previous decisions. So that's always a good thing. And certainly learning more about Una, number one, and more about who she is. So that is, I think overall it was a fun, introspective, and exciting episode, and not where I thought it was going initially when I saw the description. So that was a good change of pace, I think.
Yeah, I like the episode as well. I actually, of the three episodes, this is probably my favorite because they really lean into the social justice or social commentary stuff that people seem to think wasn't part of Star Trek but has been part of the Star Trek for the last 55 years. They make a very interesting point at the end of this episode, and it might come down to who wrote this episode, which I might get into a little bit later in the spoiler section. But yeah, I like the episode. I appreciated the examination of Una a bit more in her background. I appreciated some scenes between Spock and Pike, which were pretty interesting. We got a lot more Hammer in this episode. And also, as you said, Dr. Mbenga. We get a little bit more about him as well, but it's mostly focused on Una and specifically her background. And of course, this calls back to like very classic Trek contagion episodes. There's so many ship contagion episodes. I was just doing a quick rundown of episodes. There's the Naked Time from TOS, which is in season 1. There's the Naked Now, which is in season 1 of TNG, which is just like a ripoff of the Naked Time. There was Mary in season 1 of TOS, Unnatural Selection, Genesis in like the 7th season of TNG, where everyone was like de-evolved. Voyager had a contagion episode where they had a macrovirus running through the ship. So it's a tried and true trope within Star Trek, and they executed it well. I think I enjoyed this episode probably a little bit better than some of those other episodes because you had that specific mystery about the contagion, but it was really just a setup to explore Una more. And I don't know that I can think of any of the other episodes, contagion episodes, where they used it for a character study. And like I said, there's a very specific commentary at the end of this episode, and specifically to do with Una, which I really appreciated. Sorry, I cut you off there.
Oh no, I was gonna say, so I didn't watch the Ready Room this week, but I think the episode where they interview Akiva Goldsman, the showrunner, and he talks a little bit about the format for this series, right? How Strange New Worlds is going to be more episodic. One of the pitfalls of episodic storytelling is that you don't see that, like, the character development that we see with like Discovery, where it's a more serialized show, but that what they plan to do with this is to not, it won't be completely episodic. So we still see Captain Pike struggling with his knowledge of his death. We see in this episode, we learn more about Una and her background. So I think that's going to be a theme, which I think I really enjoy and appreciate, because to me, it's jarring to see the crew experience extreme events and then next week it's completely forgotten. And I think you can do a lot more with your characters, and I think have things seem more realistic or make more sense when you see them growing in response to the various adventures that they're going to have, right? That sort of makes sense instead of just jumping from adventure to adventure. I think it's a much better way of telling the story and making you feel connected to the characters.
I think they mixed the episodic and the serial pretty well in this show. show, and it's probably the best execution. Apparently, and I think we talked about this when we were reviewing the end of Discovery, they're going to do a little bit of that next season with Discovery in season 5. I don't know if they're going to do episode by episode, or probably do arcs, like mini arcs within the season. Yeah, it's a good way to actually delve into individual characters, which it seems that's what Strange New World is doing. So yeah, I would probably give this 8.5 out of 10. It wasn't perfect, and I'm still giving some headroom just in case they blow me away, because
we need like little scorecards so everybody can recap.
Yeah, actually, if they focused even more on Una and there wasn't the contagion thing, which wasn't bad, it was a good contagion story, it probably would have been higher for me. But I understand why they did it, so you could get that information about her. But yeah, I like the episode quite a bit. All right, so what we should do now is, I guess, get into spoiler talk, unless you have something else. Okay? All right, So before I do that, I should say, please join the conversation if you're enjoying the conversation by commenting down below. And also like and subscribe. We are trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the summer, so we can give you more content like this, more diverse points of view. About 50% of people who watch these videos aren't subscribed. We really appreciate it if you subscribe. All right, thank you. All right, so moving on. Spoilers ahead. So I sort of want to start at the end, like with the Una reveal. We could go in chronological order, but it's really, we don't need to necessarily recap the entire episode, because people, I hope you've seen the episode. Go see the episode if you haven't seen the episode. Yeah. So we can just jump around to some things that we thought were interesting. So the Una reveals that she's an Illyrian, and the last time we saw Illyrians was in Star Trek, I think I lost you. Star Trek Enterprise. Star Trek Enterprise is the last time we saw Illyria. And specifically what we saw was that in Alpha Canon, we saw Archer steal a warp core from some Illyrians because he was trying to get to the Xindi homeworld. It wasn't a good look for the human race. He basically pirated their warp coil. It's one of the darker Star Trek episodes. But that's the only Alpha Canon mention of the Illyrians. There is, in Beta Canon, a mention of Illyrians in the Star Trek books. So we find out that Una is an Illyrian, specifically that she's been lying to Starfleet about being an Illyrian, and that is from Beta Canon. So there's a book called Child of Two Worlds, which talks about the Illyrians, which came out in 2015, and there's another subsequent book that came out that actually talks about Una being an Illyrian. So they're taking Beta Canon, which is basically canon that are from licensed sources like books and things like that, and they're bringing it into Alpha Canon. Yeah,
so when the contagion, I guess, first started, my first thought was that she's infected, but she's not going to tell anybody, which is where I thought that was going. So it's nice to see where she quickly opened up about who she was, because basically the whole crew, the lives of the crew were at stake. But it does raise interesting questions, right? Because she, at the end, where she knows she lied to Starfleet to get into Starfleet. And so you have to wonder, how did she pass all those checks? But her reflecting on, at the end, on her performance and how she saved the day. And even though at first they didn't think that they could use her unique genetic engineering to save the crew, in that moment where Lahan causes the warp core breach and they're both exposed to a large amount of radiation, and that they explain it away with some science/magic.
Yeah, but that wasn't very well displayed. It's like her genetics stopped her from being irradiated, but apparently her proximity to Lahan also healed Lahan as well.
Yeah, like kind of antibodies. I was like, okay, fine. If you think it works, if you like it, I love it. But yeah, so they're able to find a cure and then quickly spread that to the rest of the crew. But she raises, and I think that the point you want to touch on is great, that what if she had not saved the crew? Yeah. What if she hadn't been exemplary? Yeah. Like the model Illyrian, right? The model minority, essentially, was what it made me go.
I might be able to play a short clip of her saying this at the end.
What would he do if I wasn't a hero? One of the good ones?
She said, what would he do if I wasn't the hero, one of the good ones? And that was just smart writing. And what I wanted to say or bring up was the writers of this episode. So the writer of this episode, there are two writers. Akela Cooper, who is a Black woman who has worked on quite a few genre stuff. Jupiter Legacy, which was a Netflix show that was canceled too soon last year. Luke Cage, she's worked on 100. She's actually the writer of Malignant, the James Wan movie from last year. And Bill Wolkoff is also the writer on this episode. He's been a writer on Star Wars Rebels, but he also is the executive producer of Kipo in the Age of the Wonder Beast. So I think he's a white dude, but that show specifically, one of the main protagonists is a black gay kid, which is the first for animation. So specifically, what they're highlighting here is respectability or tokenism, right? So they're saying she's going to be accepted only because she's like one of the good ones, or back in the day, white people would say things like "you're a credit to your race" as though that was a compliment.
Not even back in the day.
Well,
I have heard like recently, oh, you're one of the good immigrants.
Yeah, you're
like,
one of the immigrants.
Yeah,
so her comment basically was, when can she just be an Illyrian? When can she just be, as opposed to having to be a superhero? If she wasn't the hero, if she wasn't the person who saved the day, because other people get to just exist in her society. So you can think about race there. You can think about the fact that Obama was like super qualified as compared to some of the other people who were president. Or you can think of it not just from a racial dimension, you can think of it from the LGBTQ dimension as well. In the news, there was a lot of controversy over Dave Chappelle's stuff about trans people. He specifically, in his set, talks about trans people who he thinks are cool, but basically people who he can abuse and won't call him on his crap. So you can think of it in a lot of different ways.
Gender as well, women having to work a little bit harder, or anybody in that position having to work harder, show up more to be considered as worthy. Right. Yeah, so I think it definitely translates to a lot of different scenarios.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that they added there, and it just goes to show when you have writers who are thoughtful, because I can imagine another writer writing this in such a way where Pike says, "I'm not going to turn you in. I think one of the good ones is not really, that was her words, but he said something very similar. They chose different words for him, so it wasn't so on the nose, but she drove it home when she was talking to herself in her personal log. Also, this is the second time that I think in Star Trek history where they have the main protagonist of the episode explain the episode with a log at the beginning, and then at the end delete the log. I think Sisko does this as well when he's recounting what he did to get the Romulans into the Dominion War.
Computer, erase that entire personal log.
So I think that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do, the way like Pike's phrasing was different, but I think at least that acknowledgement that maybe the Federation should rethink its position on the aliens and going to the bat for her to advocate, because that allyship is also what you need, because nothing really changes, because she can come out and say she's an Illyrian and she'll get booted from Starfleet, but having somebody, and that's unfortunately the way the world works, right? You need people who are trusted and respected, and have privilege, and use that privilege to advocate for your acceptance,
for your freedom, basically your acceptance and freedom. Yeah. Unfortunately, right? That's the people who have freedom you have to find people who actually see you as worthy as a human being to advocate on your behalf, because your voice alone unfortunately won't be enough. You have to build coalitions with people who are allies. And I appreciated that as well. He did mention he was going to go to bat for her, but I think her question is valid. If she didn't save the day, if she wasn't a hero, I get the sense that they are close. I don't know if they're as close. It's unclear to me whether or not they're as close as Spock, because we get Spock and Pike, because we get some hints of their relationship in this episode as well. But I thought their relationship was about on par. She's been lying her entire life about this. So this is very similar to the situation with Bashir on DS9. He knew, and he went through Starfleet Academy, and he apparently got around all the tests. I guess they don't have genetic tests. I don't know, because this is the second person that we see got around them. The other person that I think that I can remember is from TNG. Remember the drumhead, the crewman, although he didn't go through Starfleet Academy. He was just a crewman, similar to Chief O'Brien. The half Romulan? Yeah. Or not half Romulan. Yeah. I think it was his grandfather. One of his grandparents was Romulan. So he was also hiding something about his past. Yeah. So it's interesting, because people who talk about like old Trek, they complain about the fact that this is supposed to be a bright, sunny future where there's no discrimination. But there's always been a little bit of discrimination, not just from the alien worlds that we visit, but specifically in Starfleet. I was just, in my preparing for our talk, just thinking about all the prejudices that our heroes, like heroes on the hero ships, had. So we have Kirk specifically being like prejudiced against Klingons in the undiscovered countries. I think because his son was killed. Burnham and her prejudice because her parents were killed. That's more new Trek. But Picard and the Borg, Worf and the Romulans because his parents were killed, and also O'Brien and the Cardassians. So for those people who complained about the first season of Picard and how they were so prejudiced against androids, these things have been part of Trek. And you have Mbenga actually talk about this a little bit in this episode about how humans got over their prejudices but found new prejudices in the stars, which I appreciated that little nod there because it's true and it's part of Trek's history as well. The storytellers of Trek don't necessarily always use an alien world to show how prejudice is wrong. They sometimes just use the seemingly utopian Federation as well.
Yes. Yeah. Again, I think one of the things Trek has always done well is allow us to examine human nature. Like prejudice is normal, right? As you meet new things, have new experiences, being skeptical is a good and healthy thing, right? Now, what happens after is where we find ourselves in problems when we sort of entrench those prejudices when we find that they're not valid, right? There's no good reason to hate a whole race of people, right? They're never, or a new species. And it forces you to examine the why. Why are we holding on to ancient prejudices even? Like you say, like that is nothing new.
Yeah.
And even Picard, the androids, like you said, like that was, you saw like the acceptance of data constantly.
Yeah, he was a hero, exemplary hero. Yeah.
Yeah, and he had to be, right? Otherwise, he would have been on an electronics trash heap somewhere. Right. So,
that's I think it's the main takeaway, main social justice woke thing that people talk about being an issue with Trek, but like I said, has always been a part of Trek in this episode. And there are other interesting highlights in this episode, like Hammer tried to transport part of the mantle of the planet. So he apparently cannot see light, but he can feel the warmth of light. And he wants.
That is when you have really intelligent people lose their shit. Because I was confused at first when she walked in the transporter room, and as he was explaining, I was like, "You're transporting what?" Like, we really are all going to die right now. And then the same with Lahan, right? Reaching the warp
core breach. Yeah. At the end, she tries to do a core breach. Yeah. I think this is so you get hints throughout the episode that she's Illyrian and that she has enhanced abilities, but like when she takes him out and also picks him up like a simple sack, it's clear that what's going on with her. And then she comes clean to the doctor and tries to help, but he says that she can't help because she doesn't. Apparently, the way that they'll fight off infections, they burn it out of their system, and there are no antibodies. So that's interesting. A bit of lore. Pardon?
Yeah, there's essentially no response or no evidence that there was an infection at all.
Yeah. What did you make of the Lahan stuff? So everyone was speculating that was going to be her secret, that she was going to be an augment. What do you make of her annoyance with her? I feel like Khan was alive a long time ago, and she has to be several generations, at least 2, 3, 4 generations out from him. If she had issues, why did she just change her name? Why hold on to a name?
Yeah, that's obvious. Part of it too is she seems very defiant as well. So she's not going to deny her heritage, and people need to deal with it and accept her for who she is. And I think I appreciated that scene where they hashed it out. It was the sickness talking, but it's complicated. Yeah. It's not just that you're a friend, but you're a friend who has been lying to me throughout our entire friendship, and that there's no way to easily reconcile that. Right. We're not just going to be buddy because you have, and knowing for Una to know who Lahan is and know what she struggled through being tormented and teased for being the descendant of
It's likely why she saved her, though. It's also like in the first episode, we hear that Una saved her, and that's how they know each other from the past. And it's likely why she saw a kinship with her, even though she's not an augment, why she felt she had a soft spot in her heart for her, because if people knew about her, she would be similarly persecuted. So she got to avoid the persecution by hiding, and Lahan is braver and decided not to hide. Yeah.
Yeah, because I imagine Una has used her. We know she can fight off infection. She seems to have super strength. So it's probably not unrealistic to think that whatever genetic enhancements she has have helped further her career, but she hasn't been open with it. And I can see how, that's a difficult choice, but it makes sense. If she believes in Starfleet and the Federation as strongly as she does, and its ideals or some of its ideals, and you want to be a part of this thing, then you have to hide yourself or a part of yourself to advance. And people have made that choice. That's uncommon struggle. It's unfortunate, but you see, because then it's where else in the world could she go or do what she's doing, open about who she is.
So that's the other thing I was thinking about. This society has gone past like capitalism and it's mostly meritocracies, but you can't do anything you want. If you want to explore the stars, you can do it on a slow ship, but if you want to be on the splash ships, you have to go through Starfleet Academy, and you have to go through a very rigorous process. And as we found out last week, thousands of people want to be in Starfleet. So it's not open to anybody. You have to earn it. So, yeah. And that's what she wanted to do.
Yeah. Gotta pass for a regular old humanoid.
Yeah. Although there are other, as we learned from Measure of Man, there are several people in Starfleet who have super strength. Several humanoids that have super strength. Vulcans technically have super strength. So do Klingons. Compared to
like in your species, right? Be normal for your species. Because I guess to this point, people just assume she was passing herself off as a human. I assume. Yeah, that to the point that we were talking about earlier, where it was like glossed over. They do show it in the scene in this screenshot. You can see her lighting up first. But she's on top of Lohan because she just beat her down. And you can see her skin also lighting up as well. So I guess because she was touching her skin, her protection was extended. It doesn't make quite that much sense, but they actually showed it. They actually spent the time actually to show it. I'm like, you need a good 2 weeks for an antibody response, but whatever.
Yeah, and we also get between this story and also the B story down on the planet, we get more information about the Illyrians, specifically the fact that this colony of Illyrians was Hermite 9 is where they are. I think it is. These Illyrians are trying to de-engineer themselves, and unfortunately, that's what led to their downfall because they would have been able to burn it out of their system, similar to the way that Una did, if they weren't driven to join the Federation. So it's interesting. It's also interesting when she has this conversation with Lohan about the different ways that genetic modification is thought of in her culture. Specifically, and she makes a good point here, why is it okay for humans to terraform an entire ecosystem of an entire planet? Because we've seen Trek do that. Why do humans decide to change an ecosystem instead of changing themselves? And they decide to change themselves and try to establish some sort of harmony with an ecosystem.
Yeah, they adapt. But when she said that, I was like, oh, why are we out here like expending all of these resources and like just changing entire planets and ecosystem to benefit ourselves instead of
adapting?
Just not going there, leave the place alone, or adapt yourself to the environment. So it was an excellent point.
And it's a completely different way of thinking about genetic manipulation, especially if you think from the human point of view. We have a history of conquest, but you can imagine a different species that doesn't have that same history and it maybe has a more symbiotic relationship with their planet, but also wanted to explore. And based upon their symbiotic relationship with their planet, leads them to a different point of view to have a symbiotic relationship with the next planet that they visit. They need to adapt themselves as opposed to trying to adapt the planet. So it was an interesting and new way of thinking about genetic manipulation, which I appreciated.
And all this to how we, like another controversial issue, like genetically modified organisms, right? Because that's the idea there, is to give those organisms a trait that allows them to survive in the conditions that we have created, right? More drought resistant, more pest resistant, all of that. So they have this intrinsic ability as opposed to continuing to apply things that, make or change the conditions. So even there, it's, that's one of, as our planet continues to change, right, climate continues to change and become less hospitable in a lot of places, we need to start thinking about how we change how we live. right? Change what we grow so that it can survive in this environment that because we've already screwed up, right?
Yeah,
And how do we navigate that?
unfortunately, because we can't get our stuff together to stop doing what we're doing, we might have to adapt to the new environment that we created for ourselves. And you're right, modifying our food is probably just the beginning of that. There are thoughts that maybe we can do geoengineering, and that's something akin to terraforming to reverse some of the impact that we've had on the planet. But yeah, genetically modifying ourselves or the foods that we eat is another way to go. Of course, the obvious way to go is to stop doing what we're doing. But I don't know. We shall see whether or not we do that. We've known about climate change for some time now, and our trajectory doesn't look great around changing that. Yeah. What else did we miss here? Oh, at the very end, Mbinga. So Mbinga is the one who caused this issue, and
Yeah, I was like, I thought it was interesting because Hammer, God bless him, is so intelligent, but he's also so arrogant. And I think if Una hadn't told him, like, check everything, right? No, okay, you sure you don't think this is the problem, but double check it. And sure enough, one of the transporter in the medical bay was the problem because he didn't update it or whatever. So always check work. Double check.
Yeah, he didn't go in for maintenance when they were last in space dock because he has his daughter in a pattern buffer because she has a disease. It's a cygocomia. And apparently she had 12 weeks or something like that to live. So we've actually seen this before also in Trek. We saw it in the TNG episode Relics with Scotty. He kept himself in a transporter buffer for even longer than Mbinga is here. But he's a physician and not an engineer. So Scotty figured out how to keep his pattern in the buffer continuously. But in Mbinga, it looks like he's taking his daughter out from time to time so that her pattern doesn't degrade. So again, some interesting Star Trek lore here, or something that they touched on in canon before. So she decides not to turn him in. I'm not sure if she's going to tell the captain. I feel like she's going to tell the captain, but she's also giving him a separate power source so this doesn't happen again. And then we see, like you said, we see her log at the end questioning when she could actually just be an Illyrian, and then we see him actually take his daughter out of the buffer to read her story. What is her name? Her name is Rakia, I think. Right. Yeah. Rakia. Yeah. I'm trying to think if we missed anything in our discussion.
The red shirt.
Oh, yeah. We get advanced photos from Paramount, and there was a picture of this ensign who had a red shirt, and they highlighted him, and I thought for certain he was going to die. He was the one who brought the contagion on. So this guy who's bashing his head through the window and take a save there, he didn't die, but he was patient zero. He opened up something that he probably shouldn't have opened up, or I don't know if he shouldn't have opened it up, but because they were exploring. They were exploring to figure out what happened to the colonists who apparently also contracted this thing, but also ran into the ion storms and I guess merged with the ion storms, so they became like ghosts or whatever, or electrical beings. So yeah, he's going through this cabinet. Yeah, he's going through this cabinet, and I guess I don't know if they illustrate it very well here. That the way that I guess they do illustrate it because he's using the flashlight. They did say that it gets transmitted through light. So maybe his little flashlight is what activated the virus there. Yeah. So they haven't killed a red shirt yet. I thought they were going to kill a red shirt based upon the advanced photos that they made public earlier in the week. But yeah. Anything else that we missed? We saw a little bit of Uhura in this episode, but again, her episode was last week, so she just a little bit of a highlight. They did show that the cadets live in bunks, and I assume that the ensigns do it too. And you see that in lower decks. And you also saw that on Discovery, because Burnham was sharing a room with Tilly because she was a prisoner. So that was a nice production addition there. That was pretty cool. Yeah. All right. So I don't think we have anything else. So that is what we think. We are interested in hear what you guys think. So please comment down below, like and subscribe for more content like this, and we will see you next week. All right, guys. Bye. Thanks.
Bye.